The board will now come to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Present. Alderwoman Flowers. Present. Alderman Bosley. Present. Alderman Moore. Here. Alderwoman Hubbard. Present. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Present. Alderman Ortman. Present. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Here. Alderman Arnowitz. Here. Alderman Wessels. Here. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Present. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Here.
Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. No. Alderman Vollmer. Present. Alderwoman Howard. Present. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Ogilvie. Here. Alderman Carter. 27 present.
Quorum being present, I see everyone in the chambers and the galleries. Please rise for prayer. We will be led in prayer by Superintendent Larry Holt of Jennings Mason Temple and Holy Temple Kojic.
Father God, in the name of Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior of this world, we ask you, O God, look upon this august body in deliberation of said law. Give them to make the proper decisions. Give them wise counsel. Give them understanding. Give them knowledge. Let there be no refutation of benefits for your people, and grant them, O God, your grace, your mercy. In Jesus' name we pray. Thank you, Holy God. Amen.
I asked the superintendent, had he played basketball. He said he played football and sent people flying as he came through the hole. So you can imagine he's a big man. We'll spend with our regular order of business to take up our courtesy resolution calendar. I move for adoption of our courtesy resolution calendar and obtain a second on that motion. Seconded by Alderman from 25th. Alderman from the 9th, would you like to approach the dais? Oh, there he is.
Thank you, Mr. President, Director. Today's a special day because we're going to honor the first female Director of Public Safety for the City of St. Louis. I mean, boy, we've come a long way. So anyway, this was a long time in coming, and we've kind of had the resolution sitting out there trying to work on it, but this is a person that's dedicated to the city. I've known Charlene since I got elected in '99, and when she came back, which you'll hear that, when she came back to public safety. She's a can-do person. if she doesn't know, she finds out, but there's not much that she really doesn't know. That's a compliment. So I've always enjoyed working with her. She's a special person to me, and Jen is up here, and I know she wants to say a couple of words too before we break the resolution up.
Oh, thank you. We're here today to honor our first female director. I too, like Kenny, have been so impressed with Charlene over the course of the 10 years, 12 years that I've known her. She has provided exemplary service to our city and is one of the most knowledgeable city employees that I know. And so I'm happy to honor her today and show how proud we are that our city has been able to make this progress. Anyway, so having said that, we are going to read part of the resolution. Whereas Charlene Deacon began her career with the City of St. Louis over 37 years ago in January of 1976 in the Department of Personnel. And whereas since that time, she has worked in various capacities in several city departments, including the Department of Health and Hospitals, the Mayor's Office, the Department of Parks, Recreation and Forestry, and the Department of Public Safety. Whereas Ms. Deacon served as Executive Assistant to the Director of Public Safety from 1988 to 1991 and returned to the Department of Public Safety in January of 1999, whereas in April of 2007, Ms. Deacon was promoted to the position of Deputy Director of Public Safety and served in that capacity until January 2013, when she was appointed to the position of Director of Public Safety by Mayor Francis Slay. And whereas Ms. Deacon is the first woman to hold the position of Director of Public Safety for the City of St. Louis. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis that we pause in our deliberations to recognize the many accomplishments of Charlene Deacon, and we wish her continued success, achievement, and accomplishment. So, thank you, Charlene. Here you go.
There's been a request to make this resolution in bank. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 20th, seconded by the Alderman from the 18th. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please prepare another copy of the resolution in bank.
So noted.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 20th?
I'm always very proud of our city. It is somewhat of an indictment that this is the first female in that position. However, she has been literally rolling up her sleeves and working for public safety in the city of St. Louis, even though she didn't have the title for many, many years. In my brief time after the unfortunate accident, in that brief time, I got to know her as public safety director when she was first coming in much better. And when we were doing some of the efforts with regard to our public safety dollars for children, I saw the depth of her care in addition to her knowledge, and her administration is always very important. And we have a lot of great people in the city of St. Louis who administer things for us every day. It's important for them to have that administrative background and the knowledge, but also the care. I believe that she has all three of those. There are some very difficult things in our public safety for the city of St. Louis. It's a third of our budget, as you know, Mr. President, and we talk about that all the time. Police departments coming in, we've had some issues with firefighters, we've had some issues with regard to our corrections facility. All of those are still there, but none of those take away from the capacity, capability, and the efficiency of our great director. She happens to be a woman, but she's a great public safety director. Thank you.
Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleague from the 20th actually stated many of the things that I hoped to, but I just want to take a little time to just thank Charlene for all of her work for the city of St. Louis. It's been a pleasure working with you over my 5 years down here at City Hall, and I really look forward to working with you into the future, especially as, you know, Alderman Schmidt from the 20th mentioned with all the large projects and undertakings that we have ahead of us. And certainly, it's a momentous occasion that you, as the first female appointee to this position, is a really awesome thing. But certainly your competency and your efficiency at getting things done is just remarkable, and I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further? Alderman from the 18th?
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. I first had the opportunity to work with you in more detail when I was chair of the Public Safety Committee, and it was my pleasure to do so. Believe it or not, I noticed what you did in the office. You were not the director at that time. You brought a sensitivity to a complicated issue we had. Those were the first times we were trying to expend the public safety dollars for programming throughout the city, and you were diligent about that work. I don't think that you are just a public safety director who happens to be a woman. You were designed a woman, and you bring that sensitivity to the table. So thank you, and I look forward for further working with you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Charlene, I tell you, I've had an opportunity to attend a number of E&A meetings and watch you present. And I think that everybody summed it up perfectly. I think what Alderman Schmidt summed up is that you don't just bring the knowledge and the experience and everything to do the job, but you also bring the passion of wanting to make sure that the job is done well and the city is represented well. Those qualities are hard to get. And I think that the city of St. Louis, we are indeed lucky and we're blessed to have you fill in that role. So congratulations. And as we've told other people, this resolution, although it's but a piece of paper, it is indeed the highest honor that this board has to give. And what it does is it cements in time some of your many contributions up until this moment, so that 100, 200 years from now, when they research the records of the city of St. Louis, they'll find your name amongst those records, and they'll know that you contributed so much so that today we pause in our deliberations to congratulate and recognize you for those contributions. So congratulations again. Let's give her a big round of applause and thank you for everything that you've done.
President Reed, Alderman Ortman, Alderwoman Florida, members of the Board of Aldermen, I'm honored that you took the time and effort and said so many kind words about me. I'm honored to have had a wonderful long career with city government. I've had the opportunity to work for a number of wonderful people in many different operating departments. I am grateful to the mayor for giving me this opportunity to serve as Director of Public Safety. Public safety is a department that I know extremely well. And in spite of that, I love it dearly. So thank you ever so much, and I hope to continue to serve the City of St. Louis, the Department of Public Safety, the Board of Aldermen, the wonderful citizens of our town for many years to come, God willing. Thank you so much.
Been moved and seconded that we adopt our cursory resolution calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Alderman from the 20th. Alderman Schmidt. Alderman from the 20th, did you have a resolution 88? You have anybody here for that today? Okay. All right, nice. We'll turn to our regular order of business. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my honored guest Bruce from the Painters Union and Celeste from the Realtors.
Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the board. I'd like to have as my honored guest today the Ameren UE, Ameren, Missouri family, the AT&T, Ms. Shirley Stennis and Mr. Leroy Grant, Attorney Hope Whitehead, Attorney Gerald Christmas, and my very, very special guest today is Larry Honorwitz.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have for my honored guest today, of course, Ronnie Auer, who's probably hiding in the leisure room, Director Charlene Deacon, Director of Public Safety, Eddie Roth, and all the members that were here from Public Safety that already ran back to work because they knew their boss was here watching them.
Yeah, exactly. Alderman from 26.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to announce as my special guest today, resident of 26th Ward, Attorney Hope Whitehead. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 15th with a special guest.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I'd like to introduce as my special guest today my granddaughter, Miss Addison Jane Newman, and my husband, Special Assistant to Mayor Francis Slay, Stephen Grigali.
Alderman from 22nd.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to add to the special guest list from AT&T, Mr. Chris Pickle.
All right, thanks. Alderman from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to have as my special guest this morning Rhonda Smythe from TrailNet. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. Mr. President, I'd like to have for my special guest this morning Phil Berry. Phil is a retired member of the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Local Union and was certainly a political savant in our carpool in all the years we went to the Missouri General Assembly. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any further introductions? Any further introductions? Alderman from 13th, you recognize on approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for approval of the minutes from June 28th.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Report of city officials.
Report of city officials can be found in sections A, B, and C of the agenda and have been placed in all aldermen's mailboxes.
Dispense with line item 7. Would anyone like to take any bills off of any of our informal calendars? Would anyone like to take any? Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I would move for third reading and final passage of Board Bill 104.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 15th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderman Conway. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Carter. 26 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 18th and third read and finally passed. Board Bill number 104. Alderman from the 17th.
And I'd like to take resolution number 30 off of the informal calendar. And
Please proceed.
Move for passage of I guess, do I need to
No, just move for adoption of resolution number 30.
move for adoption of resolution number 30 with the previous roll?
Move for the Alderman from the 17th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? It's been a request for a previous roll. Hearing no objection, motion carries.
That's the extent of resolution for informal calendar.
First reading of board bills.
Board Bill 136, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance establishing a stop site for all northbound and southbound traffic traveling on North Sarah at Finney and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 137, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance establishing a stop site for all northbound and southbound traffic traveling on North Sarah Street at CD Banks and containing an emergency clause. That's the extent of first readings.
Reference to committee.
To the Streets Committee, Board Bills 136 and 137, that's the extent of reference to committees.
You dispense with line item 13 and 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill 89, committee substitute, sponsored by President Reed and Alderwoman Behringer, an ordinance reaffirming the provisions of ordinances 62391, 66691, 67617, 68409, and 68934, establishing a policy for the disclosure of potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officials and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 70, sponsored by Alderwoman Flowers, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to execute upon receipt of and in consideration the sum of $1 and other good and valuable consideration, a permanent easement which shall give, grant, and extend, and confer to the Procter & Gamble Manufacturing Company the right to build and maintain pipelines and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 94, sponsored by Alderman Ogilvie, an ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to execute upon receipt of and in consideration a sum of $12,000 and other good and valuable consideration, a quitclaim deed to Remise, Release, and Forever Quitclaim to KAM Investments, certain city-owned property located in City Block 4627, property known as 6800 Rear, Manchester. Board Bill 122, sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance pertaining to the transit sales tax pursuant to Ordinance 63168, creating the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, directing the treasurer to deposit funds received pursuant to said sales tax into the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, Account 1, appropriating $10,032,500 from said sales tax and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 123, sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance pertaining to the transit sales tax imposed pursuant to Section 94.660 pursuant to Ordinance 64111, creating the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, directing the treasurer to deposit funds received pursuant to said sales tax into the City Public Transit Sales Tax Trust Fund, Account 2, appropriating $10,032,500 from the said sales tax and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 124, sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Kennedy, and ordinance appropriating the sum of $20,065,000, which sum is hereby appropriated out of the Transportation Trust Fund to the Bi-State Development Agency for transportation purposes, and further providing that the appropriation is conditional upon the Bi-State Development Agency supplying the Board of Estimate and Apportionment an annual evaluation report, further providing that in no event shall the comptroller draw warrants on the treasurer for an amount greater than the amount of proceeds deposited in the Transportation Trust Fund during the period from July the 1st, 2013 through June the 30th, 2014, and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 127, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, and ordinance recommended by the Parking Commission authorizing and directing the city acting through the treasurer in her capacity as supervisor of parking meters to issue a subordinated parking revenue bond in aggregate principal amount not to exceed $1,500,000, appointing a bond registrar and paying agent in connection with the bond, approving and authorizing the execution of a supplemental trust indenture number 3, a continuing disclosure agreement if required, and a tax compliance agreement, authorizing the negotiated sale of the bond and the execution and delivery of a bond purchase contract and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 108, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property from E multiple family dwelling district and J industrial district to the H area commercial district for properties on Parkview Place, Children's Place, and Parkview Place, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 109, sponsored by Alderman Villa, and ordinance affirming adoption of a redevelopment plan, redevelopment area, redevelopment project, authorizing the execution of a redevelopment agreement between the city and Carondelet Broadway TIF Incorporated for the redevelopment of the Carondelet Coke redevelopment area, designating Carondelet Broadway TIF Incorporated as developer of the redevelopment area and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 110, sponsored by Alderman Villa, and an ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing and directing the issuance and delivery of not to exceed $7 million plus issuance cost principal amount of tax increment revenue notes for Carondelet Coke redevelopment project and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 111, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, and ordinance recommended by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment authorizing the city to enter into a development agreement with Anders, Minkler, Huber, and Helm, LLP, authorizing the city to issue its taxable industrial development revenue bonds, Series 2013, in a principal amount not to exceed $2,300,000 for the purpose of providing funds to pay the cost of acquiring certain equipment for industrial development project in the city. Board Bill 113, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance adopting and approving a revision to the St. Louis Innovation District Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Plan, adopting and approving a redevelopment project for the redevelopment project area 1A, establishing a RPA 0A 1A 2 sub-account of the St. Louis Innovation District Special Allocation Fund containing a severability clause. Board Bill 114, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance authorizing the execution of a First Amendment to the redevelopment agreement between the city and St. Louis Innovation District containing a severability clause. Board Bill 115, sponsored by Alderman Rhodey, and ordinance authorizing the issuance and delivery of one or more series of tax increment revenue notes in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $167 million plus issuance plus cost of issuance for certain reimbursable redevelopment project costs associated with the St. Louis Innovation District redevelopment area and containing a severability clause. Board Bill 119, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, and ordinance amending ordinance 65857 pertaining to the redevelopment agreement between the city and Grand Center, amending same to authorize an application for abatement for the 3207 Washington project containing a severability clause. Board Bill 118, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, and ordinance pertaining to the employees' retirement system of the city, authorizing and directing the Board of Trustees of the retirement system to seek a qualified status determination letter from the Internal Revenue Service and to adopt regulations relating thereto and containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 55, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, and ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and the comptroller to execute upon receipt of and in consideration a sum of $30 or $10 for each conveyance to easements onto the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission forever for the right and easement to construct and maintain a lighting system for its Highway 6440 in under and across city blocks 450 and 418 and adjacent areas containing a severability and an emergency clause. That's the extent of perfection consent.
Alderman from the 24th, you recommend.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request we remove Board Bill 89, committee substitute, to the regular perfection calendar.
Madam Clerk, please make note of that change. Place Board Bill number 89, committee substitute, on the regular perfection calendar. Any further changes? Any further changes? Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on motion for the perfection consent calendar.
President, I move for perfection of the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar.
What?
Board Bill 118 was supposed to not be placed on the consent calendar.
Madam
the
Clerk,
consent perfection.
Madam Clerk, please place Board Bill number 118 on the regular perfection calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Alderman from the 13th, you recognize on motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for perfection of the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
That's the extent of perfection consent.
Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill 89, Committee Substitute, sponsored by President Reed and Alderwoman Behringer, an ordinance reaffirming the provisions of ordinances 62391, 66691, 67617, 68409, and 68934, establishing a policy for the disclosure of potential conflicts of interest and substantial interest for certain municipal officials and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 16th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 189, Committee Substitute.
I move for perfection of Board Bill 89, Committee Substitute.
Moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd. Alderman from the 16th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board Bill 89, Committee Substitute is legislation that the President of the Board of Aldermen and myself, as the Chair of Legislation, introduce every 2 years since 1999. And it is allowing us to supersede the Missouri State Ordinance regarding personal financial disclosure. And any city that's over $1 million is allowed to do this. If you go to the Missouri Ethics Commission website, you'll find that they actually have wording for you, an ordinance to do for your city. So this bill comes up, we review it in legislation, and then every 2 years we pass it here at the Board of Aldermen. Well, this year we decided to take a closer look at this legislation. In doing so, it was said that maybe there should be some tighter restrictions on it. And so we took Board Bill 89 back to committee, and we had some amendments put onto it, which is what we're looking at, Board Bill 89 Committee Substitute. And hopefully everyone in here had a chance to read what those changes were and how they would impact you. According to it's the law of the state of Missouri that we have to have this passed to them by September 15th. In doing that, that would mean that today we would have to pass it out so it would be voted on, and it gets to the Missouri Ethics Commission because we go down today. If we do not pass this legislation, what will happen is that the city of St. Louis would revert to the Missouri state statute. And that is what would happen if we don't pass this bill out today here at the floor of the Board of Aldermen. Now, I do want everyone to know that this bill has to do with personal financial disclosure. And if you have a conflict of interest, you have to fill this out. That is the law, whether we have Committee Substitute 89 or the Missouri State Statute. Everyone should be filling it out if there is a conflict of interest. We did find in the Legislative Committee that it is time to readdress more what has to do with conflict of interest, all the other aspects of this legislation so that we as a body have a better understanding, so that we all know it. Because I know that if you are new to the Board of Aldermen, sometimes this legislation, even the Missouri state statutes, can be confusing. So we have been on the phone with the Missouri Ethics Commission. So I stand here before you to let you know that I do fill this form out every single year. I have the form on me. I am not required to, but I do fill it out as an alderman. You should have a copy of the form. You are informed in January that it is due May 1st. So I bring this up because I want everyone to know that the amendments that were put before us specifically were to gear towards different city offices, and that's what the amendments do. There is no penalty clause, and in the Legislative Committee, we did agree that we need to look at a penalty clause. Whether we stay with the committee substitute or we revert back to the Missouri state statute, we can still come back for a penalty clause. That is where we are with Committee Substitute 89.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think everybody will recall that this bill came up several weeks ago. I believe actually we voted to send the bill back to committee. Everyone will remember. There were some amendments added. The amendments are clear. They do add more people into what we'll call, for lack of a better term, the state system. We would require more employees and more elected officials in city government to fill out this personal financial disclosure form that's provided by the Missouri Ethics Commission. I tried to pass these out to everybody. If I missed anybody, I have some more copies on the desk here. Everyone's welcome to take a look at it. The nice thing about this Missouri Ethics form, two nice things. One is that there's no question about whether you should or shouldn't do it. If you have a conflict or don't have a conflict, you fill it out regardless of the conflict. Even if you don't have a conflict, you fill it out, you send it to them. And so we don't have to sort of rely on the fact that people are looking out to see if they have a conflict. You just do it affirmatively. You're just required to do it. The second thing that I think is important and is nice is that, you know, it's clear exactly what you're supposed to disclose. There's a lot of people who are used to filling this out already. The form exists. The form is relatively clear on what you should do. When we talked about this several weeks ago, I think a lot of us, me included, had not had a chance to take a close look at the form. The form requires you to disclose information about where you derive income from, companies you might have part ownership in. What the form doesn't do is force you to say, well, I made $53,000 from this other company, or I made $22,000. It just says if you made more than $1,000 from a company in the last year, put that company on the form. So it's not quite the level of financial exposure, I guess, that I sort of thought might be in the form before we'd had a chance to take a look at it. The amendments that were added in committee, I think made what we're trying to do here better than probably what we had been doing in the past. It added more people in, I think, for more transparency, which is good. The big limitation of what came out of the committee, though, the second time, is that we excluded a key group of people from having to fill out this form, and that key group of people is ourselves. The one notable absence of who has to fill out the personal financial disclosure is the Board of Aldermen members. So what we have now is a case where if we pass this bill, we're going to ask a bunch of people, city employees, other elected officials, to fill out the personal financial disclosure, but we're going to say, except us, we don't have to do it. You guys fill this out every year, but the Board of Aldermen is going to take a pass and not fill anything out. And so I think that's a real weakness. I think for the sake of consistency, for the sake of optics out on the street, what this looks like, how this gets reported, I think it's important that all the members of the Board of Aldermen also fill it out if we're going to ask a bunch of other elected officials to do it. And the way we get there today, the way we ask ourselves to do this, is if we vote no, we'll just have the state ethics system kick in, at least for the next 2 years. And so we'd all fill this form out by May 1st of every year for the next 2 years, and we'll have a level of transparency that we haven't had recently. And if in the future we can concoct what we think is a better system locally, we still have that option. We can still go back, roughly 2 years from now and say we would like a different group of people to fill this form out, or we'd like to sort of adjust the rules locally. But I think, I think the editorial board will have a field day if we say, my neighbor has to fill this out, but I get off scot-free. I'm not required to do it. So at the end of the day, if we vote no, the state system will kick in. The state system is relatively clear. The guidelines are there. Is it perfect? I don't think it's perfect. I honestly think that candidates for office shouldn't have to fill this out, and the state would require candidates to fill it out, and I think that's, if you're just a candidate, you don't have the level of influence or power that an elected official has. So is it maybe a burden for candidates? I think it is, but I'm willing to live with that imperfection, at least for a couple of years, for the sake of, I think, enacting something that is pretty common sense. So that's my comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from 25th?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to inquire of my colleague from the 16th, if possible.
Alderman from the 16th, will you yield the question to Alderman from the 25th?
Yes.
Alderman from the 25th, please proceed.
Thank you. Can you tell me who exactly will be covered underneath this Board Bill 89 at this juncture?
Yeah, it's all in this form, but who won't be, it'd be easier to tell you who won't be, and that will be anyone who has the authority to sign a contract. So originally, when this bill was asked to go back to committee, it was because they wanted to know if the head of, streets or parks was under this, and they were not. So if it does revert to the Missouri State statute, they will not be, but all elected officials are.
But is the Board Bill 89 that we're being asked to vote on today, are the members of the Board of Public Service covered underneath that, so they will be required to disclose or complete this form?
Yes.
So, and then along with that, we are also mandating that all citywide electeds, does that include the county officers as well, would be required to complete this form?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we are requiring this of all of the electeds that are citywide, including the county offices, and then also, which was my primary concern with the bill as it was originally written, the Board of Public Service, the folks that actually sign contracts on behalf of the city of St. Louis and enter into financial agreements and arrangements with people on a pretty regular basis, were not completing this form, and so they will be required to complete this form, as this board bill is written currently.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the first? Alderman from the 28th? Alderman from the 28th?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I am going to vote against this bill today because it doesn't include the Board of Aldermen. I just think that is too ludicrous. If this bill does not pass today, then we will go back to using the state statute as we did before, I think it was 1999, and we will all elected officials will be filling out the financial disclosure form, which I just think that's something. How could we possibly exempt ourselves? Then, as the Alderman from the 25th pointed out, that financial disclosure would not require members of the Board of Public Service and others who sign contracts to fill out the financial disclosure. But there would not be any reason that we couldn't, in September, bring back another bill, a city bill, which includes those other folks, and require them to fill it out as well. So that way we have, I'm sure we could do a floor substitute today. We don't have our attorney here today. It seems to me that the best thing to do is just go with the state statute, and then if we all agree that others should also fill out the financial disclosure form, we ought to do that when we get back in session in September. So that's my point of view on it.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the first?
Mr. President, members of the board, if the Alderman from the 25th would yield.
Excuse me, who did you ask for?
I'm sorry, not the 25th, 24th. I'm so
Alderman
sorry.
from the 24th will yield for questioning to the Alderman from the
yes.
first. Alderman from the first, please proceed.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd just like to say that I didn't know we didn't fill these things out. So for 12 years, I had filled them out. So when I ran for office, I filed mine with the Ethics Commission and filed it with the clerk. So I just think that that's a good thing to do. Yeah. In fact, I think we ought to also tell a lot of other things that we don't. But saying all of this, I'm reading Section 3 of the disclosure reports, and it's on page 2 of 5. line 7, it says, each elected official, candidate for elective office, the mayor, all city employees with authority to sign contracts on behalf of the city and members of the Board of Public Service, blah, blah, blah. Each elected official, why don't you think that covers the Board of Aldermen? I must be missing something here.
Right, so we're talking about two different things.
Okay, I must miss something.
Yeah, this requires the Board of Aldermen to disclose the things in category A and B below here.
Right, exactly.
And if, to the clerk of the Board of Aldermen, if they think they have one of those conflicts.
Right.
It doesn't require them to file the personal financial disclosure form with the Missouri Ethics Commission.
Which we used to do, okay, right. So your opposition is that that leaves a loophole by saying, oops, I didn't think that I had a conflict, so I didn't file it, right? Is that what your understanding is?
Exactly. And the other thing is, if you do have a conflict, but you think no one will see it or no one will notice that conflict, you know, there's really no. It's kind of the honor system, right?
Well, it is. If you file a report, you have to put the report on file with the clerk. And any time you file a report, anybody is able to come to our clerk or / lawyer and pull the report and look at it. Okay, so that is something. But I hear what you're saying in that they can just say, I didn't think it was a conflict and not file it. And I do believe, I'm in agreement with you. I think every one of us should have to file a report. And for that reason, I'm also going to be voting no, okay? Because we should disclose conflicts of interest. It is very important that the public have belief that we are down here dealing fairly and honestly. And sometimes I've been down here and we have been on the very thin line of that I thought was conflict of interest, okay? So if this board bill does not require each and every one of us and everybody else to file disclosure reports, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to vote this down and to bring something better this fall. I'm gonna have to agree with the Alderwoman from the 28th, or do what I did, which is to fill out this personal financial disclosure report. So I agree with you.
Great.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 20th.
Just when I thought it was getting simpler, it seems to be getting more complex. I have not looked at this for quite some time. I do remember that prior to coming down here at the Board of Aldermen, I had an opportunity to look at this sort of situation. As I understand it, a number of years ago, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, the state legislature required a two-part sort of filing. One was on conflicts of interest, which obviously...
It's been a request for point of order.
Your staff is lobbying during the course of the meeting. It's hard to hear and follow the conversation.
Tom, would you please not have conversation with the alderperson during the course of the meeting? Yes.
So there was a two-part process. One was to file any conflicts of interest, which obviously if somebody has a conflict of interest, they should be recusing themselves from that vote. But there was also a filing annually. Plus there was also a personal financial disclosure statement. As I recall, at some point, I don't know if the state legislature did this right away. We have some people from the state legislature and they may remember, their memory may be better than mine would be on this issue. But at some point, the state legislature said, you know, with regard to the personal financial disclosure statement, there are some burdens there, and we think those burdens ought to be placed on certain individuals who have more responsibility for signing contracts and that sort of thing. I don't recall all those persons. I do remember that they did involve mayors. I think people who would be like either our comptroller type situation or something like that in various municipalities. A municipality I was involved with at the time elected like we did later on, not to, obviously we had to file the conflict of interest, but not the personal disclosure statement. You know, it's always good for us to file as much as possible for people to know what's going on with our elected officials, but I think that it would be improper for anyone to view this as something that we haven't somehow been doing appropriately since 1999. what we've been doing is taking what the state legislature did, recognizing that this was more burdensome on some folks who had very little to do with regard to signing contracts. In fact, we have some people in some of our city departments, as we know, who have been signing contracts and doing things who apparently had more authority and power than any of us 28 down here at the Board of Aldermen. So I think realistically what I would expect as a taxpayer and a citizen of the city of St. Louis is I would want to know that anybody who has the ability to contract with anybody is filling all of this out to make sure that that they don't have a conflict of interest. I see nothing wrong with us filing it as well. It is additional burden. We do have the ability that the state legislature has provided. They see that the importance with those who actually have the jurisdiction and authority to contract. I just want to make it clear that just because we haven't been filling this out doesn't mean that somehow we've been superseding state law or we've been trying to hide anything or doing anything improperly. We've been filing this sort of as a matter of course. Every 2 years, the state legislature allows us to do that. If we choose to do more, bravo for us. If we choose to do what the state legislature allows us to do to protect the citizens of our city and our state, I think that's fine too.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 25th?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. One, I'd first like to welcome Sable Jones, Tim Logan, and Steve Spreck as my honored guests today. But also, I would like to inquire of my colleague from the 24th Ward, if possible.
Alderman from the 24th.
If he'll yield for questioning.
Will you yield for questioning to the Alderman from the 25th?
I'm sure I've earned this.
All right, Alderman from the 25th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So my understanding as this bill is currently written is that this is the same bill that we have passed the last few sessions with some exceptions as it's been more broadly introduced to citywide electeds and also the members of the Board of Public Service. Is that your understanding as well?
Right. The bill before us, 89 committee substitute, adds disclosure for people who had not previously been doing that disclosure. That's correct.
So previous years when we have passed this, the Board of Aldermen has also not been required to disclose this personal financial disclosure statement or complete the disclosure statement.
Right. We have essentially opted into the minimum standard that the state allows us. We've been doing the minimum for 14 years. This bill, 89 committee substitute, asks that other people do more, but not that the Board of Aldermen do any more.
So I think I've been very clear over my years down here that I don't exactly use the state of Missouri as a standard bearer for ethics in our country here. It's one of the reasons why I've co-sponsored a number of your bills from the contributions limits and also expanding our conflict of interest policy within the city of St. Louis as well. I personally have recused myself of voting, even though I was not required to under law, for 2 board bills while I've been down here in which my family members had some sort of personal financial interest in them, both of which were my uncles, which are not currently included underneath city law. So I'm curious if by voting no on this, are we just setting the stage to continue what we have been doing versus voting yes on this, where we're at least making some progress and we can come back and introduce another bill that would include the Board of Aldermen? I am certainly in favor of including the Board of Aldermen as a body that would be required to complete these disclosure forms, but I'm also interested in making sure that the people who have direct contract responsibilities right now are going to be responsible for filling this form out as well. So your perspective, you're asking us to vote no on this currently. I'm of the mindset to vote yes because I would like to see the folks that do have a direct financial tie to the city and have an obligation to complete contracts, sign contracts, that they are disclosing this as well. So I'm wondering, do you believe that we should not do this and go back to the way that we've always done this, or should we at least make some small strides and then come back and deliberate even further on this bill so that we can include the Board of Aldermen?
Right. Well, voting no does not take us back to what we've been doing for 14 years. Voting no requires us next year, by May 1st, to fill out the state's personal financial disclosure form, something we haven't been doing, I gather, since 1999. If you're in favor of adding the Board of Aldermen to 89 committee substitute, maybe the way forward is that someone introduce an amendment to specifically add the Board of Aldermen to say, affirmatively, we'll fill out the personal financial disclosure, and then we still, capture these other offices who have, the authority to sign contracts, which I think is something else that is maybe equally important as us filling out the form. That might satisfy many folks' concerns, I guess, maybe yours included.
Do you sit on the legislation committee?
I do.
Was that an amendment that was offered during deliberations in the committee?
It was not.
Can you, if this is something that you're in favor of, can you elaborate as to why it wasn't added in committee? If you have any insight.
No, I mean, that would require me to read the minds of other elected officials. I don't know why that wasn't offered. I mean, I do think when it was voted back to committee, an effort was made to pass a bill out of committee that was stronger than what we have been doing. And that is what happened. This bill is stronger than previous iterations. However, there were those of us in committee who voted against it because we had concerns that what was added was not particularly clear, and we sort of preferred the clarity of the state system in that you know who you're supposed to file it with, you know the date, the form exists, and it's not just some language buried in a bill that nobody ever looks at, which I think was the concern of perhaps the Alderman from the 11th and my concern when we voted against this in committee.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, I'd like to inquire from the Alderman on the 24th.
Alderman from the 24th, will you yield for question to the Alderman from the 23rd?
Yes.
Alderman from the 23rd, please proceed.
I also sit on that committee. At that time when there were committee substitutes being added, did you offer that substitute?
I didn't offer any amendments.
But that would have been a good place to do that, right? In committee would be a good place to introduce a substitute, right?
Indeed. I mean, I will say that, I sort of expected us to get there, and we didn't get there.
But as a committee member, that's where you would have done this. These things were added. Not any of the aldermen, and what I learned in the committee, not any of the aldermen sign any contracts. Did you ever have you signed a contract since you've been here?
No.
No, neither have I. But what was added in there, what was added in there, which I didn't even 100% agree with, did include a lot of other people that do sign contracts, right?
Right. This is what we're talking about.
Well,
Board Bill 89 CS is a chocolate chip cookie, and what I'm advocating for is a blueberry muffin, and we're just trying to decide what's better. Do you like the chocolate chip cookie, or do you like the blueberry muffin? They're both okay. But I'm saying the blueberry muffin is a little bit better, so let's go with that.
By voting no to this and going to the state statute on this, the people that don't sign contracts will fill out these forms, and the people that do sign contracts won't have to, right?
I don't know. I would have to go back and look at the state statute to confirm that. They may be. I don't want to say they are included or they're not included because I need to refer back to the statute. If there's somebody in the room who has that statute available, I'd happily take a look at it.
As we went through this, if you remember, we had agreed, or we had said, we were going to have to come back if we pass this, and we were going to add to it one of the things that, beside the Board of Aldermen not being in there, one of the things was, and we couldn't figure out how to get it done, was a penalty clause. And we had said we would come back and we would do that. Right?
Okay, so I think this is what you're proposing. I think you're proposing that we make other people do it now, and we'll deal with our stuff at some indeterminate time in the future.
No.
And I think what we should do is we'll do it now, and we'll sort out the issues with folks who sign contracts in the future. Let's be the leaders on it rather than putting the burden on somebody else before we put it on ourselves.
Sure, I agree. We who can't sign contracts should hold ourselves accountable, but the people that sign contracts shouldn't. This bill holds the people that sign contracts accountable. And by voting no, yes, we'll fill this stuff out. That's no problem. It only take 20 minutes at the most. There's not a lot there. It's completely useless in the sense that I can't sign a contract. I have no ability to sign a contract. When we get sworn in, we say in that swearing in that we can't expend city money. So let's fill this out. What difference does it make? And let's don't have the people that do fill contracts out not worry about it. I have no other comment other than that. But I do think we should go with this, and I think we should amend it, and I think we should go farther with what we have. I think it's a start. I think you walk before you run. I do believe that we can get this, or I think we come back during the summer and we make the amendments before this has to pass in the middle of September.
All right. Alderwoman from the 28th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. If we pass this bill, we are making it easier on ourselves and harder on the other folks. Signing contracts is not the only thing, not the only way that you can have a conflict. We make votes every day, and if we have a conflict, we shouldn't be voting on those things. If we revert back to the state statute, I actually don't even recall why we changed it back in 1999, but if we will revert back to the state statute, we'll all have to fill out the financial disclosure statement. For all these years, the folks that sign contracts that are listed in here have not had to fill it out, and it is probably a good idea to make them do it in the future, but not by having us not do it. So it's just my view on it.
Alderwoman from 6.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'm concerned about why the Board of Aldermen weren't included initially in this board bill and why it wasn't offered as a substitute in committee. Even if we look at amending this bill today, I guess my question is, should we be looking at it more thoroughly and given more time to make a intelligent decision? Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 8th.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the board. And I'd heard this discussion, and it does seem a little silly that we don't include the Board of Aldermen. And I do remember filling this form out. And yes, it took time, and it was always aggravating for me because I do taxes for a living, and all of a sudden I got to have our thing done for the expense account and have this done, and all of these different things done at that time of year. But I think it's imperative for us to make sure that we are transparent. I mean, the public does have the right to know. I don't think that this is particularly onerous to fill out. I think we serve the public. They need to know what we're doing. Who do you work for and make more than $1,000 from in a year? I mean, I'm happy to tell you that. I think it is important that the public, and if I was no longer an alderman, I'd like to know who's working for Sandstone, who's working for ACI Plastics, who's working for Emo's Pizza, who's working for all of these different companies when they have business. And then sometimes, and I've seen down here, we've had a couple of bills where we've had a colleague that has had some interest and something goes through the consent calendars and they're marked as voting for it, and we'd have to go back and undo it backwards just so that they could abstain and not do that. I mean, they want to know what businesses you personally own. I mean, I got a law practice. I'm happy to tell the world. It's free advertising. You know, what partnerships or joint ventures are you in? You know, if I'm in ABC Striping Company, you know what? They might have accidentally gotten a bid with Bi-State to paint a city parking lot, but I think that needs to be able to be brought to people's attention over time. We're not asking a lot here. You know, what limited partnerships or corporations do you own more than 10% interest in? I mean, I think that's important. And if I own more than 10% of a company that is somehow indirectly got a contract out at the airport, I think the public should know that. I mean, it's not that bad. I know that sometimes when you take public office, you know, you don't like disclosing things, but I guarantee you the road you got you here, going through a campaign and being called every name under the sun and everything about your life already being bastardized, filling out this is easy. I mean, that's easy. You know, what stocks and bonds do you own in value of more than $10,000? Well, you know, I own Ameren. I don't know that I got $10,000. I'm sure I don't have $10,000, but Ameren comes down here all the time and works with us. You know? Hey, the people in the 8th Ward would like to know, when I'm voting on something, do I have something? And also, this serves as a little roadmap for you and yourselves to remember, hey, that's right, I did own Ameren, or my wife inherited, you know, $500 million in Ameren, something along those lines. Miscellaneous income. And I know that this trips up a lot of elected officials with time. You know, list the name and source from which you, your spouse, or dependent children receive $1,000. You know, some people have, you know, you might be asked by someone to do some consulting. Before you know it, it's over $1,000. I mean, you see how much we pay consultants down here, and then all of a sudden, you realize that they've got a bill for a tax abatement or a lease or something at the airport that the city might have an interest in. I think it helps you refresh your mind besides letting the public know. And I don't personally have a problem with that. And then the real property that you might own, you know, besides your house, what do you own, you know? Alderman Vaccaro and I, we got little bitty farms. We're like gentlemen farmers. We go out and work our butts off on the weekend and then maybe enjoy our farms for 15 minutes. But it is a little bit different. I don't think we're asking that much. List the name and the address for each corporation that you own. Not that big. One thing is, and I know this gifts and honorarium, you know, now that the alderwoman from the 15th Ward is married, you know, wedding presents, you know, you would have to put on these farms over $200. And I remember when I got married, at that point in time, I had to call up there and make sure I had to list out wedding presents we received, and you know what? We did. I mean, it's, you know, but, you know, nobody gave me a $5,000 wedding present. Maybe my in-laws, I don't know. They paid for the wedding. But, you know, the bottom line is the public should know who you're getting big gifts from, just to make sure that they're perceptive. You know, lodging and travel paid for you, any trust assets. You know, we're not really asking a lot. I don't think any of these things do not make sense. And I think that we should include the aldermen. And I know that one of our colleagues here does have an amendment now that they want to include the aldermen, and we're not asking ourselves to do that much. And actually, I think it's not only beneficial for the public, but it's beneficial for you yourself to kind of go back through once a year or every other year. Here's the things we're disclosing. These are the things to be aware of. You're not doing anything harder than running for office. And when you ran for office, you went through a gauntlet of nonsense and accusations or whatever the case might be, and whoever opponent ran against you. So I would support an amendment to add the Board of Aldermen to this.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I now have to get the mental picture of Farmer Steve riding on his tractor through the woods. But as he did bring up that, today is July 12th, which is National Cow Day. So everyone support your cows. But speaking of farm animals, this is a situation of involvement or commitment. When you sit down to have breakfast, think about this. If you have bacon and eggs, the chicken was involved in the breakfast, but the pig was totally committed, and I believe that's what we should be also. Thank you.
I think Alderman from the 25th was up, and I don't know if you have anything for us, Alderman from the 25th. Did you have?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to echo that I would support an amendment to this, and I think that after having conversations with a number of my colleagues on the floor, that there is a general sentiment that we would like to do something along those lines. Some folks have concerns whether or not we would be able to pass this out with regard to the state statute, so that if we do add the aldermen into this board bill, that in effect, since this is our last meeting before convening for summer legislative recess, that we will not be able to pass this before it goes into effect. And so it is my understanding that when we reconvene on September 13th, that we still have time to pass this out, finally pass it, perfect it, et cetera. So with that, I would support an amendment.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further? Alderman from 24?
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to go back to the questions that the Alderman from the 23rd and the Alderman from the 25th asked me. I didn't have the state statute in my hand when they asked me that question. I do now. This is section 105.483, number 12, or number 11, in the state statute. So the question from the Alderman from the 23rd was, if we listen to me and we vote no, we're telling department directors that they don't have to do this disclosure. And the state statute, that's not what the state statute says. The state statute says they do have to do the disclosure, and this is the language. General counsel, blah, 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 and then each official or employee of a political subdivision who is authorized by the governing body of the political subdivision to promulgate rules and regulations with the force of law, or to vote on the adoption of rules and regulations with the force of law, unless the political subdivision adopts an ordinance. So that's clearly all the members of the Board of Public Service. They adopt, promulgate, vote on regulations that have the force of law. I think that's probably every department director in city government. So if we vote no, we are requiring all the department directors to do the personal financial disclosure. For 14 years, the Board of Aldermen now has told those people they don't have to do it by adopting this local ordinance. We've been the ones telling them you don't have to do it. So if we wanted them to do it in the past, it was our fault that they weren't doing it. If we vote no on this, department directors will have to do the PFD with the State of Missouri Ethics Commission. I hope that adds clarity on what a no vote means in this context.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 23rd?
I just want to say that I stand in favor when it comes up. I think the amendment to add the alderman is good. I'm fine with it. And let's introduce it.
Yeah, Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I want to thank the Alderman from the 24th for bringing up the fact that the 28 members of the Board of Aldermen were not included. I think that was a wonderful step toward having what you want. Sometimes you don't get everything. A lot of times I haven't. But I would like to I'd like to make a motion to introduce amendment number 1, floor substitute, and shall I read it, or will the clerk read it?
Please, yes.
The amendment says that the amendment says the mayor, all citywide elected officials, members of the Board of Public Service, the supply commissioner, and the 28 members of the Board of Aldermen. So we add that, and that would be placed in to the board bill at page 3 of 5. I don't have my bill here. Lines 1 through 4. I'm doing it from memory here. Right. So that would include the 28 members of the Board of Aldermen, and hopefully that would address the concern that he had about us not being required to make the appropriate declarations of any kind of conflict.
Okay, just to clarify.
It's not a committee substitute.
Yes, but also just to clarify, starting at line 1 on page 3, going through line 4, that paragraph will be replaced with the paragraph on the amendment.
That's correct.
All right. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th. Any discussion on the amendment that's before us? Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think we had gleaned in committee, and I could be wrong, that the state statute applies to full-time city employees, and my phone in the 11th Ward never rings. I'm a part-time alderman. So as a result of that, I don't think this would cover us, whether we adopt this amendment or not. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. And listening to all this discussion this morning, I guess it brings me back to how I try to have clarity when I was raising my children. I don't get them confused by what I expect of them. This has already gone back to committee, and here we are again today, still not prepared to understand what we want to expect of ourselves and confusing others of what we expect of them. So as far as I'm concerned, let the state statute rule. I'm voting no on everything.
All right, any further discussion? Alderman from the 18th.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. As one of the members of the committee who sat through very long hearings on this, this was considered in the committee. There were a number of questions that were raised that simply at that time we did not have the answer. So as opposed to holding the bill in the committee determined to pass it out for further discussion here at the Board of Aldermen in case there was the desire to move forward on it. So this idea was discussed, and language very similar to it was introduced in the committee. What we finally decided to do was to try to get the bill that's before you passed, and then come back and make any amendments really kind of based upon this discussion right here. There were a number of questions that were raised, the legalities of certain positions, who has what authority to do what, who should be included, what were some of the other feelings here at the board by other board members. All of that was manifested itself into a very lengthy meeting. I think the alderman from the 11th even raised one of those questions that was brought up in the meeting. So I didn't want other members of the board to think that this was not discussed within the committee and that there was not a will to try to do more than what is in the bill that is before us. But there were a number of questions that were not able to be answered, and the position then of the committee was to come back and look at it after the board returns from summer recess. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 28th on the amendment that's before us.
Thank you. I think this is on the amendment before us. My question, I guess, would the alderman from the 11th yield?
Alderman from the 11th, will you yield for question to the alderwoman from the 28th? Alderwoman from the 28th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. So it's your opinion that even if we add the words 28 aldermen, that it would not apply to us anyway? Did I hear that correctly?
I'm going to need some help possibly from the chairperson of our committee, but it is my understanding that the existing state statute only applies as it relates to the conflict of interest forms being filed to full-time city employees. And under that scenario, I think it's a judgment call. And I make things up all the time, Alderman, you know that. But we did in fact have and I'm sorry I missed the comments from the alderman from the 18th, but we had a very lengthy committee hearing on this. sometimes it went well, sometimes we didn't get along. There's a surprise, but it certainly lasted, 2+ hours. I think we had some very good discussion. I think unfortunately, or fortunately, we're a bit underneath a time gun here. That's one of the problems. My problem in the back of my old head is that, good people are good people and bad people are bad people. Let's take something that we discussed briefly this morning, you and I, in a 9 o'clock hearing. Would the people involved in what I thought was somewhat tragic in our own Parks Department, would they have filled this farm out? Would they have filled it out honestly, or did we need a bunch of our money spent on a federal investigation to catch them? I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Well, if in fact if we vote for this amendment and if we in fact pass this bill out today and then in September, then if there's a loophole because we're part-time, well, let's fix that in September also. Thank you.
Alderman.
Mr. President, just as to get in the last word, which is a real surprise coming from me. Lady from the 28th, I'm not sure whether we like it or not, we can dictate to that state statute. That would just be my thought. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Any further comments? Alderman from the first, you recognize.
Mr. President and members of the board, I'd like to tell, I know the alderman from the 11th has been married many, many years, and he knows that no male gets the last word in.
It's at the lake, Mr. President. I've been talking to myself for the last 3 days.
I rise to close unless there's someone else.
No, there's one more. Alderman from the 22nd.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I just want to make sure for clarity and procedurally, if we pass the amendment, which I can vote for, but if we pass the amendment, then it becomes a floor substitute, so we can't pass it out today at all, and it will lay over until we return.
Yes.
Will we be able to third read, finally pass it before the deadline? Because if we don't, then we're subjected to the state statute.
Yes, if we amend this bill today, it will have to lay over, so we cannot pass it out today. When we get back on the 13th, we will be able to third read and finally pass the bill that day and send it over to the mayor's office. It has to be passed out of here by the 15th. So we have time to do it.
It has to be passed out of here, but does it have to be signed into law by the 15th? And if so, do we have a commitment from the mayor's office that he will? Because if the mayor decides, I'm not sure why he would, not to sign it, then we'll be, people need to understand what's going on. Exactly. We're moving this thing. I just want to get some clarity that we have the support for all of that. Otherwise, what we're doing today won't mean a lot until a couple of years or so.
Exactly. Alderman from the 16th, you had something on that. I saw you waving your hand. So.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. If I'm correct, because we discussed this in committee, is that it has to be to the Missouri Ethics Commission by September 15th.
15th, yes.
Yes, we do.
Alderman from the 20th.
Mr. President, members of the board, I am no less confused than I was earlier. However, it is my understanding that what we're trying to do by legislation, or what we normally do by this legislation, is to opt out of the more onerous sections of the state statute. So that if you want to opt out of that, I'm sure that there's a deadline. I'm being told by the Alderwoman of the 16th that deadline is that we have to have it approved, finally approved, I guess. I don't know if that also means that we have to have it signed by the mayor. That may be the case. By September 15th. If we're not opting out of it, it doesn't matter when the heck we sign it, when the heck we approve it, because frankly, we're going to have to file by whatever that date is, I suppose it's in May, the full form. I don't think, and I agree with the colleague from the 11th, I don't think that we can change state statute. However, and we would have to get some sort of legal opinion, but it seems to me that as a municipality, we can require internally our folks to file such a form with our people here in the city to make sure whether or not there's conflicts. Of course, the state mechanisms would not have any sort of penalty, and so we would have to develop our own penalty with regard to that. I don't think that we're precluded internally from having people report the sorts of financial disclosures that are in there. We're simply using their sort of format and form. But I don't think we have a deadline here. If we don't pass this thing, we're going to have to file the full form. That's the end of, as far as I can see. Thank you.
Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this comment is directly on the amendment. I think the Alderwoman from the First Ward and I agree on her intent. But what the amendment does, if you read the amendment right with the bill here, the amendment is not requiring members of the Board of Aldermen to fill out the state's personal financial disclosure form. It is requiring members of the Board of Aldermen to disclose a list of things beneath the section, but that section is not the same as the state's personal financial disclosure. So if the intent is to get us to file the PFD, and I think it is, then this amendment won't require us to file that PFD. It will just require us to disclose a variety of things, I believe, to our clerk. So I would say we get the same intent, we get the same result that the Alderman from the First and I think I want if we just let the state rules kick in. Then we're all filing the same form to the same place, including department directors. And I know the Alderman from the 11th is going to ask this question about, are we part-time or are we full-time? I saw it. The Missouri Ethics Commission reads the state law as saying we're full-time. Clearly, state legislators don't do it 12 months a year, but they are required to fill out this form, the PFD. So the Missouri Ethics Commission's reading is that all elected officials ought to do it. So when we vote on this amendment, I would just hope we keep in mind that we're not actually voting on requiring us to do the PFD. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything further? Alderman from the 25th.
I really enjoy confusing my colleague from the 20th Ward, so I'm going to just say that I do believe that this amendment actually does require the Board of Aldermen to complete the PFD. And I don't think that voting no on this amendment actually meets the objectives of the Alderwoman from the First. It certainly, the bill as it's written includes the Board of Public Service. Those people sign contracts on behalf of the city of St. Louis. They enter into fiduciary agreements with other people and other entities. And I can count a handful of times in just the limited time that I've been down here where I've heard horror stories of issues that have happened within city departments. And I think that there should be an additional level of disclosure for those folks. And so reverting back to the state statute does not require those people to complete a financial disclosure form. And so I rise in support of this amendment, and I hope it passes.
Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was just wondering if, in fact, amendment number 1, if we're going to adopt this, are the numbers 28 absolutely necessary? I had a drink of the visionary Kool-Aid that we bike riders use, similar to the alderman from the 24th, and eventually there aren't going to be 28 part-time aldermen, there's only going to be 14. So why, in fact, enumerate that number and just eliminate 28 so that it would read, and the members of the Board of Aldermen? I mean, if we're writing a hand rub piano here this morning with all this deliberative action, I think it's important we get it right.
Alderman, are you, Alderman from the 11th, are you Asking the Alderman from the 1st to yield the question.
No, I know the Alderman from the 1st for years. I was just making a suggestion, Mr. President.
All right, thank you. Also, just to clarify what the state statute says, it says each official, officer, or employee or candidate of any political subdivision described in subsection 11, 105.483 shall be required to file a financial interest statement as required by Section 2 of the section unless the political subdivision biannually adopts an ordinance, order, or resolution in an open meeting by September 15th. So by September 15th, we can adopt one in an open meeting, and that's what the state states. So we have an opportunity when we get back to finally pass it. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on the amendment? Any further discussion on the amendment? Alderman from first, you recognize the close on the amendment.
And members of the board, first of all, I'd like to address a few things that were said about the amendment. The Alderman from the 11th asked about putting 28 members of the board. I wanted to be very specific because as I understand it, we do it every 2 years, so we're not going to be down to 14 in 2 years, hopefully. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of bloodletting. So that's why I put 28, okay? As for the mention about part-time, full-time, I think that's already been addressed. I wish I was part-time, but that just isn't so, and I think that it doesn't make a difference anyway, because we are able to, the state statute allows us to put our own board bill before us and pass our own laws, and so we are specifically saying that we are including the 28 members of the Board of Aldermen, and that's allowed under the state statute, so it doesn't have anything to do with being full or part-time. I did this because I think the Alderman from the 24th was correct in saying that the 28 members of the Board of Aldermen should not be left out. I guess I would say to the Alderman from the 24th is that if there were some other things that you thought were better, then I think they should have been on our desks today when we came in here. And that's why we have all these different processes, from the first reading to the second reading to going to committee to coming out, because we can always change board bills up until final passage and signage by the mayor, and we've even had to come back and redo them. So I didn't see anything before us, and so some of the concerns that were addressed in committee, I wasn't there, but this was a very valid one to me, and I would like to renew my motion that we amend Board Bill 88 and pass amendment number 1.
89.
I'm sorry, 89.
Committee substitute. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderman from the 25th, and fully discussed that we amend Board Bill number 89, Committee substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Aye. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman Kennedy? Is he here?
He said aye.
Alderwoman Davis? Alderman French? Alderman Williamson?
I changed the alderman from the 18th to no.
Okay. Alderman Williamson? Alderman Carter? "25 aye votes, 2 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the first and amended Board Bill number 89, committee substitute. So what's before us now is the perfection of Board Bill number 89, committee substitute as amended. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion on the Board Bill? Alderwoman from the 16th, you recognize to close on Board Bill number 89, committee substitute as amended.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the Board of Aldermen. I would like to close by saying, as the new chair of the Legislative Committee, it was interesting to me when this legislation was brought to me, because I was told as the president and as the chair of the committee, this is standard. We do it every 2 years since 1999. Not a big deal. As soon as that happened, it reminded me of a story I was told once. The story goes like this, which also includes a pig. There was a young lady for the first time doing Easter at her house, and she went to put the ham in the oven, and her mother ran up to her and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm putting the ham in the oven." She said, "Well, you didn't cut each end off." "Well, why would I cut each end off?" "Because we always cut each end off. My mother cut each end off." So then she went to her grandmother, and she asked her grandmother, "Grandmother, why do you cut each end of the ham off before you put it in the oven for Easter?" And she said, "I don't know. That's what my mother did." So the story goes, she goes and finds out why her great-grandmother always cut each end of the ham off before she put it in her oven. And she goes, "Oh dear, I did that because I didn't have a pan big enough for the ham." So the story goes is that sometimes we tend to do things because that's how it was done, but in this instance, we've decided to question, why are we doing it this way? And in doing that, we brought out a lot of ideas that came in from the floor back to the committee. And I would like to thank the aldermen from the 18th by recognizing that we have a small committee. There were a lot of questions. There were a lot of details we didn't have the answer to. And it was important to bring it out to this floor so that we could have this lively discussion debate today, which was needed. So, a couple things that I need to clarify is, when it comes to whether this bill dies or it goes forward, there are two things to remember. This is done by self-monitoring. Nobody is watching us. And what I mean by that is, you as an individual have to say, I think I'm in a conflict of interest. I think I need to fill out that form. So that's the first thing to remember. Whether it's the state statute or our statute, it is self-monitoring. The second thing we have to remember is the penalty clause. The state does have a penalty clause. It does require some jail time if you're found not in compliance, but it doesn't have a fine connected to it. And when we were in committee, we did discuss the fact that we could come back next session, when we come back, and that we could look at doing a fine. The reason we couldn't get it out of committee is we couldn't decide who would be in charge of collecting and how much that would be. But I think the transparency to our voters, to our citizens, is very important here. So whether we go forward with the bill we're about to vote on, or we let it go back to the state, it does make sure that our voters know It's here, and if we are in a conflict of interest, we should be filling it out. With that, I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 16th, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd, that we perfect Board Bill number 89, committee substitute, as amended. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderman French. Alderman Carter. "24 aye votes, 3 no votes."
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderwoman from the 16th and perfected Board Bill number 89, committee substitute, as amended.
Board Bill 118, sponsored by Alderwoman Florida, and orders pertaining to the employees and retirement system of the city, authorizing and directing the Board of Trustees of the retirement system to seek a qualified status determination letter from the Internal Revenue Service and to adopt regulations relating thereto, containing a severability clause and containing an emergency clause.
Alderwoman from the 15th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 118.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move for perfection of Board Bill 118.
Moved by the Alderwoman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. Please proceed, Alderwoman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board Bill 18 allows our employee retirement system to retain its IRS qualified status by complying with the HART Act, which is federal law. Technically, the bill cannot be passed before Wednesday, August 28th, 2013, or no later than Monday, September 30th, 2013.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on the perfection of Board Bill number 118? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 15th, seconded by the Alderman from the 12th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Third reading consent.
Board Bill 86, 87, 93, 120, committee substitute 116, and 83. I'm sorry, not 83.
Madam Clerk, before going there, I would like to give anyone an opportunity who would like to suspend the rules on the previous board bills on the perfection consent calendar to come forward with those, with that list, so that we can pass those out today. Yes. Alderman from the 22nd, do you have a list of bills? Yes. Alderman from the 22nd, you recognize.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like suspension of the rules to bring the following board bills down, to place the following board bills on the third reading consent calendar.
Please proceed.
Board Bill 80, and I'm sorry, Board Bill 70, Board Bill 94, Board Bill 122, 123, 124, 127, 108, 109, 110, 111, 113, 114, 115, 119, and Board Bill 55.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 22nd, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Alderman Rhodey. I didn't hear him. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Was that an aye? Alderman Carter. Alderwoman Cruzen. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderman French. Alderman Carter. Twenty-five aye votes, 1 present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 22nd, suspended the rules for placing the aforementioned bills on third reading consent calendar. Third reading consent.
Board Bills 86, 87, 93, 120 Committee Substitute, 116, 70, 94, 122, 123, 124, 127, 108, 109, 110, 111, 113, 114, 115, and 119, and 55.
Alderman from 13, you recognize on the motion for third reading consent calendar.
To the aforementioned bills on the consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 13th, seconded by the Alderman from the 10th. Any discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Flowers. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingracia. Alderwoman Young. Alderman Conway. Alderman Ortman. Alderman Vollmer. Alderman Villa. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderman Wessels. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Florida. Alderwoman Behringer. Did I hear it? Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderman Schmid. Alderman French. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro? Alderman Ogilvy? Alderman Cone? Alderman Williamson? Alderman Carter? Alderwoman Cruzen? President Reed?
Aye.
Alderman Moore? Alderwoman Florida? Alderman French? Alderman Carter? 25 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion. Alderman from 13th and third read and finally passed the aforementioned bills. Third reading, report of engrossment.
Board Bill 83, sponsored by Alderwoman Young, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service, authorizing and directing the city by and through its Board of Public Service to enter into an agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission for the commission to provide without cost to the city various roadway infrastructure improvements and reconstruction for the Park Over the Highway project and the 3rd Street Washington Ramp Reversal project.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the third reading and final passage of Board Bill number 83.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I move for final passage of Board Bill 83.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Alderwoman, please proceed.
I would ask for previous roll.
All right. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we third reading and final pass Board Bill number 83. Alderman from the 3rd, did you say previous roll?
It was roll call.
He said roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus? Alderwoman Flowers? Alderman Bosley? Alderman Moore? Alderwoman Hubbard? Alderwoman Ingracia? Alderwoman Young?
Aye.
Alderman Conway? Alderman Ortman? Alderman Vollmer? Alderman Villa? Alderman Arnowitz? Alderman Wessels? Alderwoman Howard? Alderwoman Florida? Alderwoman Behringer? Alderman Rhodey? Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Davis? Alderman Schmidt? Alderman French? Alderman Boyd? Alderman Vaccaro? Alderman Ogilvy? Alderman Cone? Alderman Williamson? Alderman Carter? Alderwoman Cruzen? President Reed?
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus? Alderman Moore? Alderwoman Florida? Alderman Kennedy?
No more fighting.
Alderman French? Alderman Cone?
Aye.
Alderman Carter? 23 aye votes, 1 no vote, 1 present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of Alderman from the 7th and 3rd read and finally passed Board Bill number 83. Alderman from the 3rd.
I would like to reconsider my vote to place it on yes, because when we come back, I'll have information that most of the alderpersons here will agree with me. So if I'm voting no, I will not be able to reconsider it, so change me to yes.
Alderman, I can't change it now, but we can work with somebody else that may have voted aye during the process. All right, thanks.
That's the extent of third reading, report of engrossment, and final passage.
Report of Enrollment Committee.
Board Bills 86, 87, 93, 120, Committee Substitute, 116, 83, 104, 70, 94, 122, 123, 124, 127, 108, 109, 110, 111, 113, 114, 115, 119, and 55.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix his signature hereto to the end that these may become law. First reading of resolutions.
Resolution 85, sponsored by Alderman Cone, Conway, and Ogilvy. The Board of Aldermen adopts the Gateway Bike Plan.
Alderman from the 25th, you're recognized on the first reading of resolution number 85.
Thank you, Mr. President. Resolution number 85 is the adoption of the Gateway Bike Plan, and I would like to move for unanimous consent on resolution number 85.
It's been moved. Hearing no objection, Alderman, please proceed.
Thank you. As I mentioned, this is the adoption of the Gateway Master Bike Plan. This is just yet another incremental step in helping to make St. Louis a more bike-friendly place, and ask for favorable consideration.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 25th. I entertain a second on that motion. Second by the Alderman from the 24th. Any further discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we're Alderman from the 20th.
For others to add to this, I was unaware that we were doing this, but this is an important part of our city. If I could be a co-sponsor, that would be great.
I would ask that we pass it in bank, Mr. President.
There's been because the Alderman from the 20th has been very involved in cycling around town and expanding the routes. It's been a request to make this resolution in bank. And a second on that motion. Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, so the resolution will be prepared and banked. Alderman, and it's been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution number 85. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 86, sponsored by President Reed, Aldermen and Alderwomen, Vaccaro, Ogilvy, Cone, Howard, Villa, Behringer, and Arnold. The Board of Aldermen opposed the proposed route of the South County Connector and the legitimacy of the draft environmental impact statement, which fails to provide clear and accurate information regarding the impact the highway will have on the study area.
Alderman from the 23rd, you recognize on the first reading of resolution number 86.
I would ask unanimous consent on resolution.
Hearing no objection, Alderman, please proceed.
Resolution 86, we had a meeting of the people that seem to be most affected, and the majority of the people are opposed to it. The plan doesn't go beyond it ends it at Chippewa and Lansdowne. It doesn't go far enough, and I would ask that we pass resolution 86.
86. Any further discussion? Alderman from 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to, I think this is worth just spending just a brief second on. First of all, I really appreciate the folks who have added their name to this resolution, my colleagues. This is in response to a St. Louis County Highway Department proposal to build a road that would be like Highway 141 in St. Louis County through a St. Louis City park. If you've ever driven on Highway 141, this is not a parkway. This is a road built to highway standards, although it is not an interstate highway. This would be a partially elevated road that goes over the Metrolink, the Shrewsbury Metrolink parking lot, would include a full interchange just north of that Metrolink station, and would have a major impact on quality of life in a negative way. The route of this proposed roadway goes on top of the River to Pear Trail, it goes on top of the Deer Creek Trail in St. Louis County, and may make it impossible for those trails to meet and continue further north, which is something that Great Rivers Greenway has been planning implementation of for 12 years now, and will be able to implement in the next 5 years in the absence of this St. Louis County Highway Department project. And I think the most important line in this resolution is that the St. Louis Board of Aldermen has an obligation to protect resident quality of life, property values, parks, and green space in the city of St. Louis. And it is important for us to be on record saying that the St. Louis County project will have a negative impact on our residents' quality of life. It is not being built for our residents. It is being built for, I guess, their reasoning is flimsy, but in theory it's being built for folks commuting from Melville to Clayton or something. And what is more important than shaving 15 seconds off somebody's commute time is providing a quality place to live for our residents. And I cannot imagine that building this road will encourage one more person to live in the city of St. Louis, and I can't imagine it encouraging people to leave because of the negative impacts that will occur if this project is built. The St. Louis County Environmental Impact Statement that they've produced, which people can still comment on, can still submit official comments on until next Friday, is a deeply, deeply flawed document that really should not be accepted, and this project should not move forward. And with that, I will yield back to my colleague from the 23rd.
All right, any further discussion? Alderman from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. The South County Connector actually comes through the 16th Ward. And what occurred was, through the different meetings where they were doing the presentations, is that they stopped it at Lansdowne, and then they reconsidered it at Lansdowne and River de Pere, and they took it up to Chippewa, and then they stopped it at Chippewa. The flaw in the study is the fact that you're going to add more cars onto River de Pere past Chippewa, but there's no infrastructure or money set aside to fix River de Pere. I've been trying for over 10 years to get a minimum of $5 million just to fix my water problems on River de Pere. River de Pere is in the position of almost having to close the outside lanes during heavy rains because there's nowhere for the stormwater. So when you all read about the cars that go into River de Pere, off of River de Pere, it's because we have actually no curbing there, and it's considered very dangerous. So we cannot add more cars onto River de Pere in the state it's in. So because of that, the 16th Ward can't have this study. The South County Connector does not work. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 23rd, you're recognized to close.
With that, I renew my motion and ask to do it in bank.
It's been, would you like to make a motion for it?
I'd like to make a motion.
That it go in bank?
To do it in bank, yeah.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd. I'll entertain a second on that motion. Second. Seconded by the Alderman from the 16th, that we make resolution number 86 in bank. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Madam Clerk, please amend resolution number 86 in bank.
So noted.
It's been moved. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd, seconded by the Alderman from the 11th, that we adopt resolution number 86. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 87, sponsored by Alderman Vaccaro and President Reed. The Board of Aldermen requests the St. Louis Public School District to submit certifications and other verifications to the Public Safety Committee of the St. Louis City Board of Aldermen that the current contractor meets the specifications in their RFP for painting and remediation services, RFP PS 37-12-1213, and provide assurance to the committee that any further work performed on the public school buildings to paint and/or remediate any hazardous materials be done by contractors that meet the specifications of the RFP PS 37-1213.
Alderman from the 23rd, you recognize on first reading resolution number 87.
I ask unanimous consent on resolution 87.
Would you like to request unanimous consent?
Yes, I did. I requested unanimous consent.
Hearing no, I couldn't hear you at the end.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, with these fans and everything, it's hard to pick it up. But hearing no objection, Alderman, please proceed.
Yes. If you watched Channel 4 News and I believe Channel 2 News, you found that there was lead paint in the public schools, in the two high schools that are being done. There's a lot of it in the air. The school themselves did a study. They came back and said, yes, by their own independent study, that there's lead in them schools that exceed what's allowed. They also stated that they would have the contractor that got, I guess, was scraping the lead, they're going to be held responsible to clean up the lead mess. What this resolution simply asks is that there are certain people that are licensed to do lead and hazardous waste removal in the schools. We know that the kids are important, and the proper removal of the lead as well as any other hazardous material should be done by someone licensed in that. So what I'm asking in this resolution is, one, that they do that, and two, that they would send back to the Public Safety Committee confirmation that they're meeting their requirements and that they're keeping schools safe. This isn't about unions, it's not about, it's about the children, it's about lead paint, which we know is a hazard, it's about doing the right thing. I would ask for passage of this resolution, and I would like to make a motion we do it in bank.
It's been moved that we adopt resolution number 87. I entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 15th. Alderman from the 20th, you have some questions?
Mr. President, members of the board, this is somewhat unique, but I wonder if the president would yield to some questions here.
Well, you know I can't yield for questions,
You can't.
but if you have
Well, my question is, I know that our Board of Education, we elect a Board of Education, but we have an oversight group that's appointed by the president of the board, the mayor, and the governor of the state of Missouri. It's my understanding that in that role, they are governing our St. Louis Public Schools, and that it would come across their desk, this issue about contracts, safety of children and employees, in addition to the oversight given by EPA and OSHA and our Missouri Department of Natural Resources and so forth. I'm not altogether certain how much oversight the city of St. Louis provides. They probably get a permit from the city of St. Louis for this sort of work. I guess I'm sort of wondering if we're questioning the effectiveness and ability of this oversight group of St. Louis Public Schools to perform their job, if in fact we're suggesting that somehow a committee of the Board of Aldermen is more competent to provide that oversight than they themselves are. I'm reluctant to second guess them in this way on a resolution. I'm certainly concerned about the safety of our students. I'm certainly concerned about the safety of the people who work in these buildings, and I certainly think that there should be oversight. It seems to me that there's federal, state, and then this conglomeration review that we have by the oversight board of our St. Louis Public Schools. Let me do this, and maybe I can ask the alderman who's introducing this. How would getting the Public Safety Committee involved in this, how would that impact St. Louis Public Schools and how this oversight board views our intrusion on their authority?
Well, let me start off with, first, yes, there was an RFP put out. Secondly, if it weren't for the painters union going out and exposing this, this never would have came out. So when you talk about them having oversight and overseeing it themselves, then why wasn't it taken care of originally? Why did someone else other than them come out with an answer showing all this lead dust and paint and stuff in the air? That's what prompted the board to go out and do their own independent investigation. So if you're saying that they did do everything up front or that there were things in place, something slipped through, and if it weren't that the painters union called it to the attention of them, they wouldn't have did the independent study. This would have went on as is. All I'm asking at this point is that we make sure that we're taking care of, as the Board of Aldermen, the children of the city of St. Louis should be our #1 concern. And it doesn't matter if we have extra oversight into something if it's protecting the children. If you feel that the people that were doing it in the first place, that it slipped through, are good enough, then I don't know. But what I'm saying is, it's not going to hurt to have one extra set of eyes. And that's all I'm asking.
Okay, Alderman, are you ready to answer the question I asked? And that is, how would this oversight group view our intrusion upon their authority to govern St. Louis Public Schools?
We pass resolutions all the time, and I don't know that we've ever were concerned about that. I think that as the Board of Aldermen, we don't necessarily always worry about what other people think. We try to do the right thing.
Well, I guess I'm wondering if some other group decided that they were going to come in and see how we were governing our issue with regard to oversight on our buildings. If St. Louis Public Schools somehow said, well, we send a lot of public school kids through such and such a building, and now we want you to provide all this information, that would be a good thing for them to do, perhaps, to have another set of eyes looking at it. But the question is how we would, as a city, view that sort of intrusion on our authority.
Well, if the state came in, or if the United States government came in and required stuff off, which they do, we have enabling legislation. We've made it clear that with the firefighter pension and other stuff, we said, gee, we don't want to go back to Jeff City. They do come, there are groups that come over us. We don't like it. We never say, gee, this is great that they're questioning the way we do business, but they do question it, and we should have the right to question whether or not this stuff has been cleaned in a way that makes sense. All I'm saying, this is about the children. It's a second set of eyes, and it's nothing that, it's a resolution. They don't actually have to follow the resolution.
Alderman, you know, the issue here is a jurisdictional one. And obviously, even in this resolution, we indicate that OSHA has some jurisdiction. They would have the same here, presumably. EPA has jurisdiction, the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. The last time I looked, even I, as a voter in the city of St. Louis, do not elect anyone, despite the fact that I have children in St. Louis public schools, and despite all of us in here spending money on our schools, I do not elect anyone to look out for those interests in the Board of Education. However, we do have our president of the Board of Aldermen who appoints someone to this oversight board. We do have a mayor who does that, and we do have a governor who does that. They have that jurisdiction. I mean, I don't necessarily object to us having this information. What I'm concerned about is what sort of precedent this sets in terms of, are we now also going to be an oversight committee? So for instance, if I have a concern, and I have lots of concerns about how St. Louis public schools are run, just like I have concern about how government operates. So every time I have a concern about whether they've closed down a particular school, or whether they've, you know, selected a particular lunch plan, or whether they've elected not to change the scheduling for high schoolers and middle schoolers so they have to be there by 7:10 in the morning, I do have a concern of that. Are we going to require them to then have all of their decisions reviewed by a committee of the Board of Aldermen? I guess that's what my concern is in these instances. Obviously, over the years, we have tried to cultivate, and it's been a while since we brought together, because at one time we did have the intergovernmental committee, and I think there was another committee that met together to bring this oversight board here so that we could, you know, begin to have a dialogue. You know, if I were on this oversight committee and didn't have that sort of dialogue, and I got this on my desk, I would be seeing it as somehow someone was questioning how well I was performing also to protect the students and the teachers and the administrators. I think we have a right to be concerned about this. I'm just wondering if this is the route to take.
Just to add another point of clarification from what you asked earlier, all this resolution does is state the position of the Board of Aldermen that we indeed would like to make sure that state and federal laws are being followed as it relates to remediation of lead-based paint in the buildings. And that came forward based on a number of news reports that have come out in the past weeks. I myself have been involved with talking to the board members and everything. And that's basically all this does.
Well, and a lot of times what happens, Mr. President and Alderman from the 23rd, is that normally, I think what might happen is maybe the president would write a letter, or we would write a letter indicating our particular concern, and that if we didn't feel that somehow that had been addressed, then we tend to do these sorts of hammers with more intensive sort of effort. So I guess
that's exactly why we're here.
I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's exactly why we're here, without going any further. The board has been, members of the board have been notified, the SAB, and we're still awaiting the turnaround and making sure that at the end of the day, that these kids have a safe environment to go back into.
So
when
you've
they go to
written
school.
such a letter then?
I've had conversations and meetings, multiple meetings on this. I have some email correspondence I can also share with you on it. But I just want to let you know that that has been done.
And I understand. I think obviously when we're taking care of our children, that's paramount. Taking care of our families, taking care of the people who work there. I think also what we're trying to do is create a conciliatory environment where we're in partnership with the SAB, the Oversight Committee, and with these other folks so that we make sure that we are really achieving that as opposed to a situation where it's viewed almost as adversarial. I'm just
and I agree. I have an appointee on the board, so part of this language applies to my appointee also. I've had multiple conversations with them. At the end of the day, we have such a situation where lead dust is being blown over books within the library, within libraries and all this kind of stuff. And all we're saying is that it's important that we follow the applicable laws as it relates to remediation of lead. And I think that, I think the most important thing is make sure that these kids, when they return to school, they return to a safe environment. And I hope that answers your questions, Alderman. And any further discussion? Alderman from the 6th.
Do I need to ask the Alderman for the 23rd to yield?
Alderman from the 23rd, will you yield
Yes.
for questions? Alderman from the 6th.
Thank you. First of all, I just wanted to mention that I represent Roosevelt High School, which is one of the affected schools. I too have been in contact with the Painters Union and have been working closely with Stacy Clay, the Deputy Superintendent for Calvin Adams at SLPS. I am concerned, as are many of my constituents in the 6th Ward, about what is going on in this particular situation. I guess I am a little concerned because I feel like there are a lot of questions that still are unanswered. I'm hearing one thing from SLPS. I'm also working closely with Frank Oswald in the building division, and wonder if this wouldn't be a more appropriate discussion in intergovernmental affairs or public safety committees.
It's not that it wouldn't, but by the time we do that and by the time we come back, the kids will be back in school. It's important to do something today only because of the timing. If this were, as much as 4 or 5 weeks ago, that would be fine. In fact, I would have just asked to refer it to public safety. But because of the importance and because we know that there's lead dust, at least by their own admission, we know there's lead dust, that something be done now before the kids go back to school and start getting tested positive for lead. I would think that if I were the school, if I was an employee, I would insist that myself and the other employees also get tested for lead dust, because these guys were breathing that. Anyway, I don't know that it goes far enough, but it's important that we do something now as opposed to later.
I guess it's my understanding from Frank Oswald, our building commissioner, that his people have been in, as has OSHA, and that we're supposed to be getting written reports. And I think sort of putting the hammer down like this is not going to get us to the end result which we would like to see, which is to prevent this from happening in the future. And maybe when we come back in the fall would be a good time to address this as an ongoing concern and not just in this particular issue. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Any further? Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the committee. I just wanted to make a brief statement. This is nice. I think it brings some attention to an issue, but it's not required. What is required is that we have what I consider to be cooperating understandings and conversations. The time it took to do this and wait for us to vote on it and everything, we could have simply went and sat down with the board of with the head of the building commission over there and the superintendent and got everything resolved if there is a major issue to deal with. And probably it's already resolved anyway, because normally whenever something is brought to their attention, it's handled right away. I've passed many construction sites where I saw things being done inappropriately. I simply pick up my phone, I call the owner of the project, I let them know that someone who they have hired is not doing their job appropriately, and it's normally handled immediately. Now, for us to get in the middle of what is going on with a union and their issues with who they are working with, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be there. And that's more of what this is than anything else. Yes, there was some unnecessary dust. I know about the whole thing. There was some unnecessary dust, and it was not handled properly, and they've already addressed it. So for future need, the St. Louis Public Schools has been removing lead and dealing with asbestos for ever since we realized it was harming people. And we've been doing a good job, and they will continue to do a good job. And you will find mistakes and mishaps at some point anywhere. And the thing to do is to sit down civilly and handle it. But to bring a lot of negative pressure and unnecessary conversation and legal documents against a St. Louis public school system that has been belabored and benign by so many other entities over and over again. And then that subjects the children in my neighborhood to no longer have the opportunity to go to school, because then that gives another excuse for another darn charter school to open. I sponsor charter schools, but there should be specialty schools, not just regular ABC schools. And so now you're going to take more kids out of St. Louis public school system because you don't know how to go sit down and have a conversation with somebody? That's just wrong. And as the president, I'm making a statement. Okay. As the president of the Board of Aldermen, who has a representative there, who can get directly to the source immediately and deal with a situation, our representation from the board should handle that. I don't believe that this is required. I'm sorry, but I'm going to always protect the St. Louis public schools and those children, because our children already don't have a fair shake. We already don't have a fair shake. So at the end of the day, I can't support this resolution. I ask others to vote against it too.
Alderwoman, I think you made some huge assumptions there. Number one, as I stated earlier, those conversations have been had multiple years in a row. At the end of the day, the most important thing for me as a father of four is to protect the kids within the schools, not my appointee or any other appointees. All this does is ask them to go by applicable laws. That's all this does. Alderman, the only reason I clarified that is because of the statements from the Alderman from the 20th earlier. Alderman from the 3rd.
Well, I'd like to answer.
Alderman from the 3rd.
Board, I have a real problem with Resolution 87, and the reason for that is the Board of Education has more maintenance people than the city of St. Louis, and certainly more, and they're more proficient about what's going on in the way of rehabilitation, painting, fixing up buildings than this Board of Aldermen does. They have many schools out there. They have a department that is responsible for the upkeep on these buildings that far surpasses anything that the city does. And I think whatever the Board of Education does, if it's something that does not violate a law, we can look at it, but I think going into their business, telling them who to hire and re-scrutinize who they have hired to do work is ridiculous, and it's far beyond what we should be doing. I have a real problem with this 87. And what that says is no matter what organization out here in the city, what business out here in the city, no matter how proficient they are, if we or a member of this Board of Aldermen does not like what it is they're doing, we can drag them before the Board of Aldermen. What we need to do is perhaps talk to them and find out from them. They're the ones that chose these people. We didn't interview them. That's not our business. That's not what we do. They have the responsibility of looking after their own buildings. They have a staff, a much larger maintenance staff than we do here at the city of St. Louis for whatever we own, because the majority of times when we want something major done, we have to go put out a contract and hire somebody. So I think we need to contact the Board of Education and let the Board of Education determine if what and who they have chosen fits their purposes, and we need to just stay out of that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 23rd?
No, I'd like to answer. We did talk. I didn't come out with anything until the school board themselves did an independent study saying that the lead far exceeded. They're the ones. I didn't go off of anything that any union, I didn't go off of anything that TV. What I said was that if they're truly policing themselves, how did this slip through? I know that you talk about they have their own maintenance people, but over at Mellencrot School, they ran a signboard without getting an electrical permit. You know, they should be held accountable, but it doesn't matter. I mean, I can go into a bunch of stuff, but at this point, it's about the children, it's about the dust that I know that's in there. What I am going to do, Mr. President, what I am going to do for the sake of argument, what I'm going to do for the sake of argument is ask that this get moved to Intergovernmental Affairs. They said that they would have a committee hearing for me right away, even though we're on break.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd that we send resolution number 87 to the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee. It's been seconded by the Alderman from the 1st. Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Madam Clerk, please sign resolution number 87 to the Intergovernmental Affairs.
So noted. That's the extent of first reading of resolutions.
Second readings.
We have none.
Miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
No meetings next week. Our next meeting is September 13, 2013.
Alderman from the 28th?
Not on the announcement.
Okay. All right.
I'm on excused absences.
Okay. Alderman from the 22nd?
Members of the board, I'd just like to make a celebrity birthday announcement. My esteemed colleague from the 2nd Ward birthday is Monday, along with Patrick Brown from the mayor's office. So I would like to celebrate them early.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from the 26th?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Sunday, July 28th, we'll have our 9th annual back-to-school event with the 26th Ward at Alden Prairie Park. It's from 2 to 5. That's 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And shortly, right after that, 6 o'clock will be the free jazz concert held in Alden Prairie Park. The entertainer will be the Solark Band, Blues Band. They'll be there. That'll be July 28th, Sunday. Also, August 25th will be our last concert in Alden Prairie Park, which is a Sunday, 6 o'clock. And we'll have the Boogie Child Band at Alden Prairie Park on August 25th. So we're just letting everybody know and want to remind the residents to come out for the back-to-school health screening fair for the 26th Ward. And that'll be, like I said, on July 28th, Sunday. Thank you.
All right. Any further announcements? Alderman from 22nd?
Members of the board, I'd like to remind the resident of the 22nd Ward, anyone who's from the Wells, Goodfellow, Hamilton Heights, or that particular area that I represent, that we're going to have the 22nd Ward annual family reunion picnic at Barry Brothers Park the last Saturday, July 27th, from noon to 4 o'clock. So everybody is welcome. And also, the 22nd Ward meeting, July 25th, from 6 to 7:30, Friendly Temple Church, 5515 Martin Luther King Drive.
All right. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderman from 28th, excuse me, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Excuse me, Mr. President, I do have some announcements, thank you.
All right. Please proceed, Alderman.
Thank you very much. I'd like to announce that on Saturday, July 20th, the Federation of Block Units for the City of St. Louis under the Urban League will have their annual event at St. Louis University from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's an opportunity for people to network from the neighborhoods, learn about new things that they can use for crime prevention and other things for education purposes and everything else. Also, beg pardon? It's going to be at St. Louis University at the what's the name of that place? At Bush Center, how about that? At Bush Center. Also, I wanted to remind everybody, I know it's still a few weeks away, but the annual back-to-school fair that's provided by St. Louis Public Schools and the St. Louis Community Empowerment Foundation will be August 3rd, that's the first Saturday in August, at Chaffetz Arena. So hopefully everybody will come out. Last year we had about 10,000 people in attendance. And finally, just for some fun, the Jazz Bistro is sponsoring the next 3 weekends, and they're going to have Anita Jackson this weekend, Tim Cunningham the following weekend, and Good Sounds the last weekend in July. So it's very inexpensive, and it gives people an opportunity to have a good time. I'd like to also thank my group from the Potomac Heights neighborhood for organizing and preparing one of the best 4th of July celebrations I've ever had. The theme was Beach Party. We probably had about 600 people there, and it was just a lot of fun. I wanted to congratulate Captain James Moran. He is going to be retiring from the St. Louis Police Department, and he has served us well for over 37 years, but he'll still be close to home for me as the new head of public safety for St. Louis University. And congratulations to Cheryl Orange. She just got her badge on Thursday. She's been promoted to lieutenant with the St. Louis Police Department. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderwoman from 28th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move to excuse the alderman from the 27th ward due to necessary absence.
Moved by the alderwoman from the 28th. Entertained a second by the alderman from the 26th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Alderwoman from the 28th, are you doing the motion to adjourn also?
I am.
All right, Alderwoman from 28th, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we adjourn this august body until Friday, September the 13th.
Second. It's a big second. Seconded by the alderman from the 25th, the 20th, the 26th, the 18th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.